My name is Brian Wish. I'm an entrepreneur, CEO, and pathfinder. If I've learned anything in life, it's that self-discovery is a critical part of living intentionally, building meaningful relationships, and achieving the future we see for ourselves. In July of 2021, I sold all my possessions, headed west, and began a quest to live a fuller and more meaningful life. The experience helped me truly understand the power of a single moment. And through my conversations with leaders from all walks of life, I've seen how that one phone call, heartbreak, diagnosis, or lost job can transform the entire course of our lives. In this podcast, I sit down with entrepreneurs, influencers, and experts across industries to talk through the events that changed everything. Together, we'll relive the make or break decisions, hard conversations, periods of despair and hope, chance encounters, and everything that followed. Dan is the co-creator and co-owner of Farmers Restaurant Group, which owns 7 founding farmers restaurants in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, along with the distillery Founding Spirits. The company supports over 1,500 employees and continues to grow, adding a catering company, percolating on their new direct-to-consumer platform, and the environmental nonprofit Our Last Straw. Dan is a teacher at George Washington University and aims his mentoring and direct funding support to female and minority entrepreneurs, creating and delivering a time management and personal productivity curriculum for students and team. Dan is a lifelong learner, always looking to be taught something new or schooled about something he's misunderstood. A difficult period in Dan's childhood allowed him to show up in the world with more empathy for others and change his trajectory in life. Here's experience on today's One Away Show. Dan, welcome to the One Away Show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here as well. So Dan, what is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
Certainly life is full of moments, right? And those things that change trajectory. But if I think back, to one of the things that maybe has influenced me at the core most, I'd go back to 6th grade. I was super fortunate. Grew up in a nice town north of Boston, good family, good friends in school. Things had always gone well for me. And then I had a really tough time for several months in 6th grade, being bullied, lost my friends, really heard a lot of, my parents were immigrants and just heard a lot of nastiness, including from kids I'd been friends with, kind of over the prior years. And it was really 3 very difficult months, losing friends, being bullied, dealing with anxiety, and just a really tough time. And I think I'm luckier than a lot of kids that go through that. Some kids face that for years and years, right? And it's like a big chunk. But boy, those 3 months or so felt like forever and really opened my eyes to seeing people who maybe have been invisible to others, to really think about hurting people's feelings and thinking about feelings and what friendships are. And there was a lot I vowed to myself that I would forever remember. And, if you looked at sort of my trajectory before that moment and after that moment, from having friends and doing whatever, that would just look like a blip. And I think that's what, when you say like that moment, I think of it because while it was, I guess, short in time in the full context, I think it's a big part of sending me in the direction that I've gone.
Well, thanks for sharing all that. A lot to remember at the 6th grade level. You said you were from northern Boston or Boston area?
Yeah, just north of Boston, small suburb, just about 20 minutes north of Boston.
I mean, Dan, if you don't mind me asking, what was being said to you? What were you what did you lose friends over?
We had gone away as a family and gone back to Europe to visit some relatives. And it wasn't a school break. My parents took us out of school. And, that's a gossipy age and things happen and people talk. And there was just some rumors that I'd said something or done something. And just sort of like a gossip frenzy was whipped up. And all of a sudden, everything from my parents talk differently to, being Jewish, there was I think it just spread out of control. And then like kids that I barely even knew, right? It was like all of a sudden I was a target to be picked on for whatever topic, somebody might have brought up, having no one even understanding, like, wait, how did we get here? And what happened to his friends?
Yeah, it's really hard when you're younger and part of the out group, not by choice, but by force. Yeah, it rings a bell. When you go through things like that, sometimes as you work to overcome it, it can make it a little more difficult to kind of fit back into social situations in the future. Like how when you kind of think about this moment in time, kind of you grew up, kind of family situation you talked about, immigrants, now not part of a group, did you try and keep assimilating back in when you say in your like middle school and high school years, like what transpired perhaps from that, in the early years in terms of maybe trying to fit in, or were you one of those like, hey, I was kind of kicked out of the group, I'm gonna kind of stand on my rebelness from thereafter? I'm just kind of curious which path you took.
I definitely wanted back in,
Mhm.
and it was sort of good timing because for seventh grade, we went to a new school and a couple schools in our town combined. So there was a much larger population, and I had the chance to also make some new friends. But one of the things that came out of it is that the new friends I made during that difficult time, there were a couple of kids who had the courage to like befriend me. Kids
Mm.
that I had, just probably seen as invisible prior to that. And so I made it some new friends. Then I got back some of the original friends, but I kept those new friends. Yeah, the rest of my schooling, and again, before and after that, like socially, things went well for me. I was an athlete, not necessarily great, but I was an athlete, all through high school. I was happy. I had a good social life. I think what it gave me a set of armor. It gave me a set of some understanding, empathy, and made me better probably socially and more understanding, and knowing when also, like, gossip and the rumor mill is a dangerous thing, and I wanted to make sure that I was never again the kid that got caught up with, did you say this about so and so, or where were you with that? And so there were some really good lessons about it, and I was able to apply those things. And other than that 3-month period, I really enjoyed the rest of, my social experiences through that level of school.
I think what I'm hearing from you too is how you started observing situations outside yourself, with other people, kind of what they were going through. Kind of you saw humanity in two different lights. You had awareness into your own experience and other people perhaps going through similar things, and probably became much more perceptive at a young age into other people's situations.
There are aspects of the world and other people's lives that are always invisible to us to some degree, right? You can't feel everyone else's emotion and you can't see everything, but you can strive to not just step over the homeless guy passed out on the street without giving it a thought, right? You could at least acknowledge, wow, I'm stepping over a passed out human being. It just starts with like that awareness. And then you can decide what you do from there. Like someone, like you could be the one who calls 911, be the one that slips a $20 bill under his jacket, on the belief he's still alive. And at some point he's going to wake up. So I think that there's these different degrees. I never think like, oh, I don't think empathy is like an end state.
Hmm.
It's like a martial art. You're constantly trying to have more of it by realizing that you're missing empathic moments and, wanting to have more.
I think it's beautiful. It's empathy is not an end state, but a martial art of continual training. You mentioned things taking a turn in a way like sports, and it seems like you just you got a lot of human like training and life lessons early, and a lot of the personal kind of life skills that aren't always taught until later. So that's sounds very invaluable. Maybe we can just hop into it a little bit. Dan, you've built created a restaurant in the DC area that I'm sure many who listen to this have gone to, but it's a been an incredible place to eat, at least for myself, the things I've always gotten. Um, I'm sure you've heard this way too many times, but for you, how is what you experienced as a kid showing up in, whether it's raising a family, whether it's in a business environment with a leadership team, what's been the translation into everyday experience with kind of how you're navigating life today?
I appreciate the question because the answer is a lot. It's really had, like those formative years, that moment, those experiences, and what I saw, like that's why I love the industry I'm in. That's why I stayed in the restaurant industry. Because people think, the restaurant industry is about the food or it's about the drink, or, some people think that the restaurant industry is like, oh, it's cool to be in, being a restaurant owner is somehow like glamorous or whatever. It's a gritty, blue collar, hands-on, non-glamorous industry. And the glamour, if we do produce it, it's for everybody else. It's not for us. We're not participating in it. We're putting it on. But I love the immigrant employees. I love the first generation Americans. Because even though my parents came here, with an education and with their work visas and, and spoke English, they were still immigrants. And I saw like, wow, that in itself, just learning a different culture was difficult and came with a set of challenges and, feeling like a foreigner. I just have always seen the employees, of which I was one in the restaurant industry, right? I started as a busser and worked my way up, bartender, etc. And so I love the immigrant story. I love the career ladder. I love the camaraderie. A great restaurant is like a great sports team. The sum is definitely greater than the individual parts. Like I'll take a team of B players with B talent with the right motivations that gel and come together and are kind of serving one another's purpose. I'll take that over an all-star team any day of the week because our team will win. And that's what I feel like a restaurant is. You've got this coming together, shared purpose. And the short-term purpose is to run a great shift and thrill the guest. But the real purpose is that people get paychecks and feed their families and earn and grow and build relationships and bloom. And I don't think there's a better industry than the restaurant industry that creates that sort of opportunity. And that's what I love about it. And that's where I see like my own path and life experience is like drawn me into the industry because it gives me a place to help other people with this while I'm helping myself as well, because it makes me feel good to, try to help people get where they want to go.
I really liked how you connected empathy, like it's understanding the people who are serving the everyday people eating, but how you said bloom, helping them bloom, and how do you help someone bloom without like seeking into who they are and understanding what they care about, and then growing them. And I've also never heard business leaders be like, I'll take a B player, but I could finesse that to an A player in the right culture. So it seems like you really have taken a lot of care with your staff. What do you think it's like? So you seem to really care about the environment in which you let your people grow into, but there also seems to be a consciousness around the environment of where you source your food as well. I know we're shifting a little bit, but I mean, maybe share a little bit about that, because it's just, I guess what I'm picking up from you is a theme of consciousness and how you do things, whether it's sourcing of food to treating people to like an awareness of self.
My business partner and I, we don't make it easy on ourselves because we have a phrase like written down in our company constitution, which is like an 8-page manifesto. But there's a phrase simply that says, which is like the last page of our constitution, which says, everything matters, everything is personal. And we mean it. And so it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to constantly feel like we're falling short of. But yes, the food products we buy matter. Who we buy them from matters. Where our profit distributions go matters. What the people receiving the profit distributions do matters. If the restrooms are clean, it matters. It all matters. If one of the employees has a sick kid at home, it matters. If someone's added a new baby to their family, whether they've had a baby, adopted a baby, it matters that they get paid time off to be at home with that little newborn. And so we spend a lot of time working on a lot and holding ourselves accountable to falling short. There's more to do. I can wrap it up with, it's really the principles of conscious capitalism, and it's just seeing the business as having multiple stakeholders. The typical thing, right, is business has one stakeholder and it's profit. And we view it as business is a multi-stakeholder thing. And so you try to factor and balance out the impact on all your stakeholders. And for me, the planet's a stakeholder, and the mental health of my employees are a stakeholder. Profit is a stakeholder. My family is a stakeholder. And so it's for us a nice way to do business. It's in some senses more difficult. And I think in some senses, at least for us, it's just a lot easier. People say, like, take the high road, the air's cleaner up there. And I'm fortunate I have just an amazing business partner. His name's Mike V. And together we joke that we're 1 + 1 = 1. Like, neither of us are complete without each other. And so we're often falling short, and we're picking each other up, and we're picking our team up, and our team is picking us up. But that's, you're right when you say that it seems like we have kind of a mindful approach to whatever the topic is, because I think it all matters.
Appreciate the insight into the manifesto. It makes sense at a arm's length level, especially the coffee. I probably had 2 jugs of it the last time I was there. I was like, this is pretty wired for the day. So especially the sourcing of the coffee, it's got to be mindful. No, I appreciate you sharing. And it seems like you take a lot of care in how you lead. Tell me, you talk about this mindful attitude, everything matters. When you look at what you've cultivated and created, and like you said, you've fallen short, as we all do, we're human. But when you look at the intentionality around this mindfulness, could you maybe speak to some of perhaps the stories that have happened that you've seen from people that have bloomed, or customers that have shared things because of this intentional set of values of how you're showing up? Like, just curious, like, how this internal fabric has shown up externally in the lives of people that you touched through the business, right? So I'm just curious about.
That's the rewarding part, these stories. And we opened the first Founding Farmers in September 2008. So, whatever that is, 15 plus years ago. And we've got people who've grown up with us, people that started with us at 20 years old, whatever, making $10 an hour. Now they're making $100,000 or $150,000 a year or more, and they've built an executive career, $200,000 or more. We've got folks who started with us who didn't speak English, now who are still with us, and they're leading business operations. I was talking with a guest last week. She's a doctor. There was some tragedy in her family, and she ended up sort of adopting her nephew when he was little. And she said that Founding Farmers, one of our locations, became their kitchen. She didn't have children of her own. She said, I wasn't a good cook, and all of a sudden I wasn't planning on having kids. And all of a sudden, I've got a, 6-year-old son. She said that, Founding Farmers became not just her kitchen and her pantry, but her family away from, like the core family, because she had a very small family. And she said that her son was just so embraced and so welcomed, and they became regular guests. And he's now he's in college, superstar athlete. And we were just chatting and hearing her talk about they've come to Founding Farmers when they were sad. They'd come to Founding Farmers when they were happy. They'd bring friends to Founding Farmers. They would just come when they were hungry. They would stop by when they weren't even hungry. And they would walk through the door and get a smile and have a table and be welcome. And so many of their moments, the restaurant was an anchored place for them. And so that was really, really rewarding. For me to hear those stories and know that whether it's guests or it's employees, it's pretty cool that this is how you see it manifest. People grow, people change, impact their lives. That is what, for sure, it's what keeps me in the business, and I think it's what keeps a lot of our team motivated.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just created a second home or a third place, in the terminology of today, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, third place is away from home and work. Anyways, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, it's a third place for them, right?
sure.
And I think for the employees, it shouldn't feel like a workplace. It should feel like their place, right? Like that term, like it's my workplace, I think comes loaded up with a lot of, it's a place where there's just a transaction. I do my work and the place pays me. And I hope it doesn't just feel like a workplace. I hope it feels like a place that our team feels part of and care about and is connected to. And I know for a lot of them, that's what it is, because it's not just what they tell me or what I hear them say. It's what I see them do that gives me the evidence that they care about the restaurants, because the restaurants matter to them, because they feel like the restaurants are investing not just in their paycheck, but in their journey.
I'm just taking it all in. It's great to see how much you care about culture. And I think the more of I'm early in my journey, a few years in, or 4 years, 5 years in. But the more you talk to people who I'd say are 10 years in or 15, like I think you start to understand why people say culture or people first, the later they are. But when you're in the thick of the fire, the first few years, you maybe don't always, it's not that it's not important. It's just like you don't maybe have the awareness of as much, right? Just until you're kind of grown something and you're like, oh, it's really the people who are going to make this happen. So it makes a ton of sense. I was reading some of the stuff on your just personal site. Dan Simon says, if I was to unpack you, if I was to say, Dan, you were at is it MCI Center? What's the name of the arena now in DC?
Capital One Arena.
Capital One. God, it's been a minute.
Yeah.
And you were in Capital One, and on the big jumbotron, your face came up, and there was a message, and all 30,000, 20,000 people saw it, and it embodied every part of who you were and the impact you had on the world. What would it say?
Would you say be nice to each other?
You're like the more like subtle. Actually, I don't even know if I should even go there. I would say more like subtle kind of version of Gary Vee and his hard just be kind, But no, it's good.
Simple messages make sense to me. Like, life is complex, but that doesn't mean we have to make it complicated. And so many of our problems are just self-inflicted wounds. We do it to ourselves and we do it to others. And so we can solve a lot by just, be kind. It really wraps up a lot. You get a lot accomplished with that, and you prevent a lot of damage, because the damage has consequences and it has ripple effects. You're mean, you treat someone like shit, they're invisible, that rolls downhill, they do it to someone else, they're not, and it's like that negative ripple effect is real. And in the business community, even if your sole motive is profit, still make more if you're kind. At least if you have employees and you're trying to build a company and you're trying to grow something and you need people. I know there's examples out there in the news of like these asshole leaders, and they're egomaniacs and they're sociopaths and they're wicked rich. But those assholes are the exception, right? And there's always exceptions. But I would imagine if we really had the data, most assholes don't finish first. Most real assholes don't actually accomplish their goals and have long-term happiness. They end up crashing into themselves. And so it just doesn't make the news. It's not click-worthy and interesting to read about the longer journeys that like prioritize others. But when you really look at the business world and you study the case studies and you look at who's out there and you look at all the good leadership that does really well for themselves and others, companies, profitability, the kindness ingredient in good leadership is more common than people realize and more valuable on the path to success than it gets credit for.
Yeah, I think that's well said, especially about the things that you don't hear about, and the business leaders who have had long-standing streaks of success are the ones that just been consistently nice and cared about people over time. So no, I appreciate you bringing this all together, right? And threading it back to sixth grade, where you saw the impact of a damaging experience to yourself and how that impacted you, and making you think about the environment that you're creating internally and for every part of your life in a very conscious way. So thanks for all of that. One of the questions that, I like to ask and thinking about for you is just, by the outside looking in, there's good track record in business. You have certain foundations in your life that, I think people look at and be like, oh, that's amazing. But when you look at it yourself and you're, let's just say 10, 15 years from now, and you look at the problems in the world and things that you want to solve or play a helping hand in changing for the better, what does that look like to you beyond what you've done today?
All that really matters to me is that I've influenced my kids in the right direction so that as they become contributing members of society, they'll work to do something positive for humanity or strive to mitigate their negatives and the damage. And, the younger employees that I've mentored or folks that have come up in the company, I hope I've had some similar effect. Because, we're just here for like a blip in time. And so there's a lot to worry about, right? Like humans are really like the virus on the planet. Like humans are wildly successful. They have taken over the planet and now are on a quest to sort of destroy the planet and potentially destroy themselves. So I think if I've done something, I mean, either don't have kids because the world doesn't need more humans, or have kids that will take a multi-stakeholder approach to life. So that's sort of what I hold myself to. So that's what I don't really think about like legacy or things like that. I just think like during my blip in time, am I part of the long arc towards something better, or am I participating in, the destruction and the awfulness? I'm not a pessimist, but if you take a realistic view of, humanity, there's a lot to be worried about.
Have you read the book Sapiens?
I have not, but my brother, someone recommended it to me relatively recently, but I haven't read it.
I think you would appreciate the way it's written, given how you think and tend to operate in this world. But essentially, it's like the evolution of mankind and how we evolved and how ideas were spread and how they influence exploration and how, all the things. It's a fascinating read. Might contribute to ideas that you integrate into all parts of your life. So
yeah, it's definitely already on my reading list. I have a lot of respect for my brother. So when he tells me there's some material I should soak in, so it's on there.
when you say there's a lot of problems in the world, or we're helping, we're facilitating the path to our own destruction. Like we outlasted and survived. Now we're hyper successful people are on this planet, a virus. Now we're leading to our own destruction. Like what are you thinking about? Like the biggest problems ahead at a macro, like world level, but also at a human level.
Certainly one of the biggest problems I see is at a macro level, we are very effectively poisoning the environment with toxic chemicals. And we can already see the effect on humans. And so, well, I could be cynical and say a low birth rate due to plunging testosterone, and due to hormone disruption, due to the toxic chemicals in the environment, well, there'll be less humans. Maybe that's an advantage. But I'm not looking actually for humans to go away. I would like them to evolve and do better. So, if you poison the planet such that the humans can't be healthy and medical science can't come up with solutions soon enough, it's a big worry. It's easy to worry about like climate change, but if everybody's sick and everybody's got a little brain damage from, toxic chemicals, we're not going to have the smart people to work on climate change. So that's why I really look at kind of like the wellness of people as the biggest problem. And as much as I probably don't sound it, I'm optimistic. I mean, I think there remains so much opportunity, but this is why I talk about conscious capitalism, because if you don't get some balance and some regulation, and people can just, chase profit while poisoning permanently the planet, the water supply, the air supply, etc., is problematic, and it's really hard to undo it. Like, how are you going to get all the plastic out of the ocean? How are you going to get all the mercury out of the fish? Ideally, someone could invent stuff, and then the ecosystems and the health can bounce back. But that's, if you ask me for my biggest macro problem, that's it.
There's, to build on that, there's a lot of technology coming out that with lab-grown meats or fish or a number of modalities and inventions to not hurt, just say, food supply chain or kill animals. What are your belief systems around the future of food?
I'm good with a all of the above approach. Founding Farmers, we're a farmer-owned restaurant group, and so what I support are independent family farmers as opposed to corporate farms, because I think that independent farmers are much more likely to make good long-term decisions. They want to give the land to their kids and the next generation. And so my view is there's going to be billions and billions of people to feed. You need lots of ways to feed them. I would just like to see lots of ways to feed them that weren't simultaneously poisoning them or destroying the planet. And I think there is opportunity to do that, but you can't just disparage, the commoditization of certain foods, because you do need scale and you do have to feed people. The concern with farming is that all the independent farmers are gone and the whole thing is controlled by multinational giants that just prioritize profit. It's going to be very bad for national security. It's going to be very bad for the quality of the food supply chain. But from a innovative standpoint, it does take capital to innovate. I fully understand your question. And I think that, like the typical, XYZ is bad and ABC is good. There's a little more nuance to it than that. Like you could say, I only want all organic farming. Do you realize that's like 1 or 2% of the farming that's out there? What's your plan? It's like when people say we should have only electric cars. Well, okay, there's not enough electricity. How are you going to get the electricity to all those electric cars? So I like electric cars, but I think when it comes to the food supply, we should have more individuals and regional businesses and smaller businesses in the system. So if I could pick one thing to do there, I would do antitrust legislation and antitrust enforcement. It is the giant monopolies that are the thing that scare me about the food system.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting take. I mean, what I heard from you there is with innovation and the right innovation, it has a existential threat to farmers. Maybe it's not a however, but if technology and capital enables better food production systems, what you're saying is important, that there's antitrust, there's legislation that's put in place in advance of that happening at a scalable way. Is that what
That's
I'm?
right, because then you would get you still I'm not an enemy of big companies. You need big corporate and you need venture capital and you need private equity because you need innovation. But you also need to avoid monopolistic practices, right? But if you get both of those things, then you'll have enough people where small businesses can be started and grow into medium and large businesses and be independently run, or control their own board of directors. And so I think that there's a healthy balance. That's why I hear a lot of people sort of screaming from either far side of that. But both sides really, I think, need each other. Society needs both sides, but that's why the monopolistic approaches to business. I mean, we've got enough examples over the time through, this economic history. You look back over 100 years, 200 years, and any view of monopolies that you can see. I mean, you can go back longer and just look at kingdoms. They stagnate and they collapse. Like, it's not a long-term winning thing, except for those who are super rich and in the short blip that they're there, then it's probably really fun, I guess, if that's all you care about.
Tell me more about. I'm just curious because you seem like you've thought very holistically around all the pieces of your business and life. Those farmers that you're sourcing from, and you're helping the people who come to your restaurant eat such delicious meals. What's your process for finding a farm, a family running a farm, selecting them, knowing if it's a fit, to getting in great, like, what I would love to understand the intentional flow behind the people who are really feeling, at the first line of defense of the business in a way, or on the ground floor of getting you the nutrients to really create a great experience.
We have a huge advantage because, again, our owners and our largest capital partners is the North Dakota Farmers Union. And then we have additional investors at state level from other states, other farm organizations, and individual farmers are investors. And so is a national farmer organization. And so we have tremendous resources. When we need a product, we can go to the farm co-ops, the farm unions, and say, we're looking for this. And our partners in North Dakota, they bought a couple of 18-wheelers. And so we control some of our own distribution system. And so if there's a cheese we want and we get introduced to a producer in Wisconsin, or we learn of some grits from Kentucky that we want, and we control a couple of 18-wheelers, and so we can add it to the route and pick it up and bring it into DC and distribute it, into our last mile network to our restaurants. So when it comes to finding farmers, sometimes they find us, folks call us. Sometimes we're looking for a specific product. So we go back to the farmers we know and the farm organizations that we know. And, relationships just get built. And you put yourself out there and you're doing farm visits and you're going to farm events and you're meeting people. And again, a lot of times people think, oh, you just buy everything locally. I'd rather buy from an independent farmer in the Midwest or California than a corporate farm in Virginia or Pennsylvania. So it's not so much for me locality and geography. It's who owns the farmer's land, who makes the decisions on the farm, and then does that farmer follow the guidelines of things that are important to us, whether it's around animal welfare or the quality of the ingredient. And so that's sort of how it comes together for us. And then, also it's sometimes folks think that, oh, this is so cool. There's like one little farmer dropping off a box of tomatoes it doesn't work like that, right? Because these are high volume restaurants, 250, 300 seats. You can do 1,000 meals in a day in a restaurant, multiply that across all seven, soon to be eight. And you're talking 50,000, 60,000 diners a week. And so we do need to work with our local vendors to aggregate those suppliers and get all those deliveries. But you can do it. You can do it, and you can have food quality standards, and you can have parameters about, not this chemical and not this chemical, and you can cook from scratch. It just takes more effort and more time. But we have a great team, and the team is really committed to the mission to advocate on behalf of American family farmers, to be a market maker, to buy their product, to hopefully be a role model for other restaurants and chefs to say, oh, we should dive into the supply chain more and find out where it's really coming from. And there's a lot of that in the restaurant industry now, and hopefully more and more of it. If we could influence the big corporate chains when they realize that they can't just get away with serving the lowest quality ingredient from the industrial supply chain, that's pretty cool, right? Because it is those huge corporate chains that can really move the needle. And so we're always looking to try to influence the awareness of the consumer to affect the industry overall.
I didn't realize what I'd say in-depth process it was working with these family farms. And it seems like clearly over the years, but you've had to build an understanding at all levels of how this works, to relate to them, have their trust, as well, getting the right ingredients over, but just like understanding every dynamic and dimension, because it is the fuel to what you're doing. So I remember I was at an event, like a sustainability event. I'll tell you about it after, but there was someone there from a guy named, have you heard of Smile Farms? I think it's in like Ohio. No. Anyways, essentially it was just talking about how like there was a natural disaster and kind of wiped all the farm his family had, and they rebuilt it all. But I think what I really respected, and I think you said it, like it was a very blue collar type of guy who's built this incredibly like white collar life on paper, but like the humble roots of the people. It was just very inspiring. There was no ego. There was no, I'm better than you. I've done, it was really insightful to listen to. It's such an interesting event. So it's neat that you get to work with people.
Yeah, there's some super, people think that maybe there are stereotypes about farmers, that they're unsophisticated or it's not educated work, and it couldn't be further from the truth. These are, can be growing, thriving businesses. There's money to be made. It's a hard life there's work to be done. But, the farmers I know, it's the positive stereotypes that are true. Like the handshake is firm, the hands do the work, their word matters, they care about community. When you only have a few neighbors and they're a few miles away, people need each other. And so farmers build relationships, and they care about their community, and they care about their commitments and their promises. And so it's, and then, you get these family farm businesses, and they grow to be big businesses, and they're exporting internationally. And you'll meet a farmer and you turn over their business card, and it's, in Mandarin, because they're exporting, grain to China. And so I think there are some positive stereotypes that I found to be really true. And then there's just some, like, I don't know what someone might see on the surface and think like, oh, this guy just like, tills the field all day. And there is way more to it. Like it's hard to be a really good, successful farmer. And at the same time, then they have to be effective at running their family, right? Because if your kids don't want to go into the family business, the family farm doesn't continue. So I'm not a farmer. I can only speak in terms of what I see and my admiration for it and my gratefulness for it, because I do see American family farmers as part of the backbone of America. Food quality, food supply, national security, environmental concerns. And so we should all be grateful for what the independent farmers do for us.
I appreciate you sharing and the insights. It's a very well-rounded conversation, I must say. Touched many facets. Thanks for going and all the places we went. Dan, this is a treat. Growing up in the DC area and talking to you and learning more behind the manifestations of what you've enabled for so many. Dan, where can people find the restaurants as we wrap up here?
Foundingfarmers.com is the best place for the restaurants. You can learn more about the restaurants at farmersrestaurantgroup.com, and people can find me through my website, dansimonsays.com, and then Instagram, Facebook at Dan Simon Says.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. It was a treat.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you for joining me on the One Away Show. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please leave a review and follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Have a one away moment you'd like to share? Follow me on Twitter or Instagram at BrianWish_, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me about the moment that altered your life. The One Away Show is produced by Arcbound, a company dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, experts, and visionaries launch authentic personal brands. From message development to podcast production, social media content generation, and book writing, we work with you to create your arc. Head to arcbound.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and please join me next time on The One Away Show.